Hey there, my name is Douglas Ferguson, and I'm here with John Fitch,
Howdy, everybody.
and we're going to be talking about the Design Dash. And the Design Dash was a invention of John's, and we are going to just walk you through a little bit about why it was created and how we use it, and a little bit more about the workshop that we'll be offering as part of Mural Imagine.
Mm. Ooh, nice fancy transition, Douglas.
Hey, thanks.
They're
I'm
they're important.
I'm loving the virtual. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Cool.
So
So, yeah. So Douglas and I have done a lot of design sprints, and if you haven't heard of a design sprint, you can look it up on YouTube or Google, and you'll quickly find that it's this awesome problem-solving process where in 5 days you go from an opportunity, a big idea, to one. By the end of the week, you're on Friday testing that prototype with people. And each day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of the sprint is kind of its own theme. I mean, it's really awesome. Love it. But there was two particular days of the design sprint that energized Douglas and I the most. And especially me as a not only a facilitator, but a usual prototyper brought in for a design sprint. And so Thursday and Friday of a design sprint is on Thursday. You're spending the entire day making a prototype. Small team is kind of dividing and conquering. It's very energetic. It's very fun. There's not a lot of talking. It's just making. And then on Friday of a design sprint, you take what you made in one day and you put it in front of users and you interview them and let them interact with the prototype and you learn from it. I'm not saying that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of a design sprint is boring and not valuable. It totally is. But I realized that a lot of times in a company, a team could really benefit from that Thursday, Friday. And so the Design Dash is a more colored in version and a remix of like the Thursday and Friday of a design sprint. So it's less about alignment and building trust and cohesion on a team before building. It's already assuming you have that, and you just have an opportunity or a problem that in just 3 days you can quickly prototype and build. And we got creative with the name and call it a dash rather than a sprint, because it's more like the 40-yard dash than it is the 100-yard meter sprint. And so yeah, the what Douglas has behind him is a diagram that summarizes the three main parts of the design dash. The first part is remix. So rather than coming up with raw prototype ideas from scratch, you look at existing things that are out there in the world and you remix them. And Douglas and I wrote a book called How to Remix Anything. The first part of the design dash is workshopping that book. So you and your team, and ideally a user or a customer or a partner, we're really big fans of co-creation. All of you are getting together virtually. You can do it in person as well, but given a global pandemic, we've been doing these virtually. And the first part, you remix existing ideas. Then a winning concept is chosen. And hypothetically, let's say it was Douglas's concept. His remix idea for our business opportunity was combining Netflix with TurboTax. And it's like, well, what is that? What do you mean? Well, Douglas would have chosen two particular features of each one to put together, and we would prototype that. And so the second part of the design dash is actually making. So this is where you're entering into your internal MacGyver, your skunk works, your scrappy maker mindset to, in just one day, you're making a prototype. And while some of the team is prototyping and storyboarding what that prototype is going to look like and what it's going to prototype, other members of the team are recruiting, because you have to have users the following day to put it in front of. And so the second part of the design dash is a lot of asynchronous distributed work, which is kind of a symbol of the future of work, in our opinion. And so second day, you are making. And then if you've made something, then the following day, you can interact with those individuals that were recruited, and you spend the day putting the prototype in front of users about an hour each or so, and you ask questions, you let them interact with the prototype, you let them ask you questions, which will give you insights. And that day is really about listening and having empathy for the user. And you'll notice that in just 3 days, the design dash does a few things. Well, you capture insights, and Douglas can talk more about the power of insights, how just 5 interviews, for example, can give you a lot of clarity. But what I like about it is it gets people back into their maker energy, their maker mindset. And you walk away feeling very energized, proud, and confident that your team, however small or big it is actually able to do meaningful work in a short amount of time, which sometimes that's quite refreshing, because that can be missed sometimes in company culture. So that's the 3 main parts of the design dash that we made. I say it's 3 days. You could span that out however you want, but those are the 3 main components, the 3 parts of the narrative of the design dash. Douglas, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, John, I'm really curious about the types of teams and scenarios where this might be most useful. And you mentioned where the alignment wasn't as needed, and I guess how do people know if they have the alignment and when it might be appropriate to do this versus something that's maybe gonna get at that alignment piece?
My easy short answer is ask yourself, is our project already in motion? Or maybe it's your sub team that, let's say if it's e-commerce, you're in charge of just the checkout, or you're just in charge of the onboarding. If those don't exist already, and those have never been launched before, maybe a design sprint is in your favor. Whereas if you're looking for a quick win in optimization, a new add-on or a feature, if your answer to the question, is our project already in motion and has a decent amount of momentum, you can think about the dash as like a bit of an acceleration of the momentum you're already having.
Absolutely. I think, I want to piggyback on that momentum piece too. If you don't feel like there's momentum, if you feel like you're stuck, then the dash might not be a smart move, because it might not be enough to get you dislodged from that stuck. Whereas if you are in momentum, you are getting stuff done. In fact, I talked about in Beyond the Prototype how to maintain that momentum. Gosh, a few dashes after you sprint might not be that bad of an idea, right? And
you and I have actually done that. We just didn't have a name for it, right? A lot of times you and I would lead design sprints, and then what's next? Well, you kind of repeat Thursday, Friday of the design sprint over again. You're basically dashing.
Yeah.
We added a bit of a custom approach to it.
Yeah, we made it more formulaic. So it wasn't just like, let's repeat Thursday and Friday without much form. We gave people some form that they can follow to make it easier to reboot that process.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks for asking that question. And also, I think that maybe a dash could also be a prerequisite to get clarity on something worth sprinting on. So it could be used as an exploratory method to get insights to then spend the efforts on an actual sprint. So it could be sprinkled in, could be dashed wherever you need. But I would say if you are starting off a really big endeavor where everyone's like excited and looking at each other like, wow, we're about to go on this new journey, I would suggest a design sprint for that. And then to your point, it's a dash in subsequent efforts.
So would you say a little dash will do you?
It will.
So two other things that come to mind, John, are how this alignment piece is. I always remember this story one of my mentors told me, which is basically summed up to be, if there's more truth in the hallway than there is in meetings, you have a problem. And I think if you have any inclination that might be the case, then you definitely need to go into some more alignment work. And if it's really, really bad, a design sprint isn't going to solve it. And you need to do more meeting culture or purpose-driven work. And so that's I think those are some signs to really think about, like, is the design dash good for me or not?
Yeah, and also if you are someone who loves the sprint methodology and wants to find a better way to maybe sell it inside of your organization, I would suggest giving a dash a go with a small team that you do have influence over, because it's the same output of artifacts that a sprint has, which is more or less 5 hours of footage of interactions with real users and customers responding to a prototype. And to your point of like, sometimes people can just talk and talk and talk and spin, and they're saying different things and nothing's getting done. You could be the person that walks in the rooms, like you probably won't show them all 5 hours of footage, but you'll show them the highlight reel of those 5 hours of footage. And I've seen it dissolve egos a lot, because it's real. It's, here's evidence, here's emotional connection to a user saying, hey, this prototype, this thing about it's awesome. I would never pay for that. You should totally do that. And in a way, you don't even have to pitch. Those stories can help you pitch. And then maybe you're trying to convince your department head or the CEO of doing a sprint, and you could use the outputs of a design dash to win them over and say, like, yeah, we could be doing more of this if we sprinted more or dashed more. So I could see it as a vehicle of influence if you're trying to go up in the organization, and convince people to have more of this human-centered design and prototyping mindset.
Yeah, I love that. I always tell people that having these internal case studies can be really powerful, because it's one thing to point to Google or Adobe or whoever it is and say they've gotten these amazing results through the design sprint or whatever other technique it is. Well, it's like it wasn't invented here, or sure, that'll never work here kind of stuff. And so if you can find these internal case studies, can be really powerful. The other thing that comes to mind, John, that I think might be worth pointing out to folks is the power that this could unlock for young, small startups. Because often if you're like 1, 2, 3, 4 people, and you're going to be pretty aligned on your mission. But this work is really important. And I wrote a blog post pretty early on, and the origin of voltage control around design sprints for startups, and it was really about decomposing the design sprint. And I think the design dash has codified that even further.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Certainly. And I think what we can move on to next will really drive that point home is, look, Douglas and I pride ourselves in not being what people would call consultants. Like, we drink our own Kool-Aid, if you will, rather than just try to throw a philosophy at you and, see if it works for you. Wasn't our fault. Whereas we apply these methods to our own internal operations and opportunities, and therefore we're able to refine it and benefit from them as well. What Douglas is showing here is the high level, I would call it the boilerplate agenda of the Design Dash. We are good friends with the Session Lab team. It's a great agenda tool if you haven't used it yet. And soon we'll be in their templates marketplace, our library. And this is our sort of tried and true model of, if you're going to do a design dash over 3 days, you could duplicate this template, remix it to your liking, but just know that that's on Session Lab. And you'll notice that there's a lot of breaks. We treat breaks as first-class citizens, especially in virtual work. It can be exhausting to be at your desk all day long, and we make sure to have intentional breaks. And then also on the second day, there's a lot of moments of dividing and conquering. And that's important, because we don't need to all be on a live Zoom call all day long building a prototype. If there's 6 of us, 2 of us could be on a Zoom call. Like, Douglas and I could be a little micro team that's doing the recruiting. Jill and Jamar are doing the storyboarding, and maybe they're collaborating with another person doing the actual prototyping and building. And so day 2 to me reminds me of like the way a modern distributed company works. There are these very intentional moments of synchronization where you're making a decision or maybe demoing something. Otherwise, leave people to their own decentralized way of work. But we're still testing the Design Dash, and just like the design sprint has been improved over time from Jake Knapp and the other creators, we're doing the same. But hopefully this boilerplate will get you started with the agenda, at least in a meaningful way. And then one thing I wanted to show, and I think we're going to be doing that next, is, well, what might a prototype look like? Well, we do a lot of work in digital. And so we use Figma as a UI interface design tool. And it's really awesome. If you haven't heard about it, it allows you to have a Google Doc-like experience where a lot of people are in a word processor typing all at once and you can see each other. Well, Figma is that for vector-based illustration design. So it's really powerful for that distributed team to be working on the same prototype, the same digital artifact, and in a way feel like you're all there together, although you're somewhere else. And we use this dash ourselves. So we have a software program that we've been prototyping called Control Room. And if you're interested in it, you can look it up, but we basically built our own tool to help us do certain facilitation methods that other platforms weren't giving us. And we used Figma to think about what is the greatest that this could be. And we took our stab at that. It had some hunches, it had some assumptions. We put it together. We only spent about a day's total time in doing that. Again, that's the benefit of the Dash prototype day. And then we put that in front of people and found out that it was overkill. There was a lot of stuff in there that was not necessary. And that's good for two reasons. A, we have less to build. And B, that allows us to actually take an app and a web app and put it in production, which we have done. And now we're learning from that, and we'll dash again about taking that to the next level. But Douglas, you spent a long time as a CTO. You've written lots of lines of code. Talk about, if for those that aren't aware, how beautiful, for example, how we dashed, what from a technical perspective, leadership perspective, the benefits.
Yeah, I think back to early in my career when we were doing extreme programming, and then that got followed up by agile and lean, and ultimately a lot of it focused on iterative development, kind of tightening that learning loop, whether it was the difference between compiling code to running it, and then we started to do continuous integration and getting the code into the production systems as quickly as possible so that users could react to it. And really, those are phenomenal advancements across the board. And now we're in this position where we have no code systems, and we can actually create real functioning data-driven decision systems that allow us to create prototypes that are not only high fidelity but high resolution, which is really phenomenal. And I think when we look at being able to do those types of things and the amount of learning that you and I gained off of our early prototypes on Control Room, it really allowed us to take a step back and rethink things. And oddly enough, we were in one of those moments where we were rethinking things very deeply. And in fact, I think you and I were both at the point where we had some conflicting views on how we should interpret some of the results. And we were kind of really just trying to figure out what our next experiment might be. And, and as great collaborators, we were kind of moving a little cautiously because we realized we were kind of still not quite certain how to read some of these things. And then all of a sudden COVID hit. And it was very clear based on what we had learned from those experiments of those early prototypes and what the new landscape looked like. We knew exactly what we needed to do. It was like crystal clear, and we both agreed and highly aligned, and we went after it. Now, if we had built a bunch of software that we had to maintain and had to maneuver, it would have been a lot more difficult to make that quick pivot. And so I think it's really phenomenal. I've been a fan of Google Docs from the day I set my hands on it and realized that I could comment and edit, and someone on the team far, far away could see that instantaneously and respond as if we were on a whiteboard. And tools like Mural and Figma bring that to a whole new level because it's the type of assets that you can create doing that same phenomenon. And listeners and viewers can see these little red notices here around these screens. And each of these are instructions to the developer for implementation details. So this is actually the equivalent of a really complicated specification, yet so much of it's visual. And the components that would have been much more difficult to build visually, because we would have had to build 5, 10, 15 versions of it to demonstrate some animation or some change or some adjustment, we can quickly just annotate those things with some words. And then also with commenting, it's really phenomenal. You know, I can design a concept. John can come in and layer in some marketing copy and then some tweaks to the concept. Minutes later, I can look at it and respond to it. The designer can clean stuff up, leave comments and questions. It is night and day, so much faster to iterate and adapt and move quickly as a team.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you and I have worked together in a capacity of product management and CTO. And when I think about, if you're listening to this and you are a product owner in any way, like I have a contrarian belief that for the most part, you're either team building or you're design dashing. Like, because a design dash, the output of it gives you all the material you need to set your roadmap for the next week, 2 weeks, whatever your development cycle is for your product. It gives you tons of artifacts to add clarity so that your more technical people and your marketing folks can all have clarity. And because you can point to a prototype, you can point to people's reactions to those prototypes, and you're sort of the, you know, you're like the conductor of all that, and you let those individuals play their instrument, but you can all agree on what music people want to hear.
Absolutely. I love that, John. And I think that's a great place to end. It's been fun riffing with you today, John, on the Design Dash, and I hope all of you viewers out there can make it to the workshop. And if you don't, you know, you can still find us at voltagecontrol.com. Look us up. We'd love to connect.